Hello, my name is Stephanie Sauceda with Ciencia Learning, and today I'm going to be reading a little gem that a friend of mine, an amazing educator, an amazing artist, an amazing curriculum writer, and a developer of Ciencia Learning, Stacy, Miss Lewis, this book, and it's called I Am Not Being Lazy, I Just Don't Understand. And so this is about really getting into the shoes of our ELL students. Specifically in Texas, we have a large population of ELL students. And so it's really important for us to be able to understand what it's like to be a child who had no sort of control over the decision to move and not know the language, and then to be put in a situation and how that might create difficulties that sometimes educators might overlook, unfortunately. And so it's a really great read, and I'm gonna have all of my first year interns listen to this, and we're gonna have a discussion about, how it resonates for our classroom and what things possibly we might have overlooked or things you had thought about already. In any event, let us begin. I am not being lazy, I just don't understand. By Gina Paul, illustrated by DG. So this, well, sorry, my, you know, videoing tools are not super great. Nice little intro, title page. You're not going to be able to see the picture while I read because you just won't. So I'll show it to you after. Chapter 1, and it's a short chapter, so it's enough for, a principal to assign a chapter, I don't know, a week to read or something like that. I mean, you could read the whole book, but I definitely think that there's value in having educators read this and reflect on how that you know different insight, this different perspective changes your own teaching. And we should always be reflecting on our practices, reflecting on our perspectives, our prejudices, examining them and correcting them, as necessary. Let's begin. Chapter 1. As I was walking into my new classroom for the first time, I felt more afraid than I've ever felt in my entire life. Fear that almost overwhelmed me. My hands were sweating, my legs were shaking, and I was afraid that everyone could hear my heart beating like a drum in my chest. The children in the classroom stared at me with big, curious eyes. I stared back with fear and confusion. I was fearful that I would not be understood, nor would I understand what was being said. It puzzled me that I had been placed in a classroom where no one spoke my native language of Haitian Creole. As I walked to the last available seat at the back of the classroom, I felt everyone's eyes on me. I now understood how bugs feel under a microscope. Welcome, Georgette, to class 510, said the woman who I assumed was the teacher. I looked up at her standing in the front of the classroom, but all I understood was my name. At that moment, I wished I could go back to my native country where I did not have to worry about starting my education all over again by learning the alphabet, numbers, shapes, and basic words in a new language. I wanted to wish myself back to Haiti, where I felt safe and where everyone spoke my language. Moving to a new country was not my idea. I did not have a choice. One day, while eating dinner, my parents announced to my siblings and me that we were moving to a new country soon, to a big city, New York City to be exact. The Big Apple, they called it. They did not explain why. I was very sad because that meant I was leaving my friends and extended family behind. But I was also kind of excited about a new adventure. So here's Georgette at the front of the classroom. And like I mentioned before, children almost never say never, but almost never have control over where they're moving to. And so Therefore, they have a feeling like they are out of control, and it's a terrible feeling to feel. And then to have that language barrier, honestly, I can't imagine. My parents told us about the tall buildings and bright lights. They also told us about the trains that ran underground very fast. That sounded a little scary, but I still wanted to see and experience it. I wondered how they made these buildings so tall. I'd only seen buildings taller than 4 stories on television. My parents explained to us that some of the buildings were as high as 100 stories. Wow, I thought. I don't think that I will be able to see all the way to the top of those buildings. I was curious about how the trains were able to run under those buildings without the buildings falling on them. Later that night, while in bed, my siblings and I talked about what we were looking forward to do once we arrived in New York City. We were very excited to try new foods and meet new people. I am very talkative and love meeting and talking to new people. Unfortunately, in my excitement, it never occurred to me that I would encounter a language barrier. Throughout the first week of school, everyone in class was working and talking around me. However, no one tried to speak to me except for the teacher, whom I still did not understand. I tried smiling to see if that would encourage the kids to approach me, even to say hello, but they looked away as soon as we made eye contact. I was hoping that if I smiled back, then maybe I could approach them, but no smiles. I felt confused and alone, and even though there were 27 other people in the classroom, I felt like I was on a deserted island. So here's Georgette amongst her peers, and she feels completely isolated. She doesn't know the language barrier, and she didn't even consider it, because probably not many children are considering, oh, I'm going to have to experience second language acquisition. It's all very shocking, and I would assume very jarring at whatever age they enter the school system. So that concludes chapter 1 for us. Chapter 2. The first few days of school, whenever we left the classroom, the teacher would say, Georgette, come. As she made a motion with her hand for me to follow along with the class. She used that way to communicate with me when we had to go to recess, gym, and the cafeteria. Unfortunately, my first time in the cafeteria was not a good experience. I followed Miss Levy, that was the name of the teacher, to the cafeteria as she led us to the table and then just left. I was completely lost. I did not know what to do. So I followed the class and sat down and waited. The cafeteria smelled and sounded very different than I was used to at lunchtime back in Haiti. It was loud, chaotic, and confusing. The children were laughing, going from table to table and being playful with each other. And some even shouted things across the room to each other. Back in my country, each class was served family style on a picnic style table where we were able to have conversations. However, our voices were not supposed to exceed a certain level. We were not allowed to leave our tables unless it was to use the restroom, or else we would get in trouble. It was the complete opposite here. I wish someone had prepared me for what to expect. So here she is, and that's something that possibly educators might not think about, how the way in which lunch is delivered might even be different. And so back then, I guess the way that they sat down family style, a picnic table fairly far away from other people, it allowed for conversation. People didn't feel left out. And here she is, where you have to have friends in order, what used to be. Now they just, the whole table sits down. My daughters can't eat together, which they get very sad about. So I was hungry and nervous, but I simply did not have the words to ask what we were supposed to do about lunch. Therefore, I sat there and kept waiting. It seemed like forever before I saw a woman with an apron on and a net on her head walk out of the kitchen and called out, "Class 509, get in line." An entire table full of students got up and formed a line where the food was. By the second time the lady came out, I realized that she was calling each table to get in line in order to get food. I observed the kids once in line to see what they were doing so that I would know what to do when my table was called. When the lunch lady with the apron looked at my table and said, "Class 510, your turn, get in line," I waited until most of my class lined up before I followed them. I was very nervous about eating the food because I had no idea what it was going to taste like. Since arriving to the United States a little over a month ago, prior to starting school, my mom had only cooked me food from my country. Therefore, I had not had an opportunity to try any new foods yet. I hoped that lunch tasted good. When it was my turn to get food, the lady behind the food counter asked me, "You want French fries, hun?" I did not understand what she was asking me, so I said yes, which was what the student before me had answered when the lady had asked her the same question. The lady placed some long, fried, light brown food, what looked like cut up potatoes, and 5 circular fried dough-like pieces of food on my tray. So here's Georgette with her food of tray. She's like, doesn't know yet that these are French fries, and I'm assuming these are chicken nuggets. As I made my way back to my seat in the corner, I smelled the food on my tray a little to see if I could make out what any of it was. I hoped no one saw me and thought I was weird. After sitting down, I took small bites just in case I didn't like them. I realized that I was right. The light brown food was potatoes. I later learned from one of my siblings that the circular fried dough-looking food was called chicken nuggets. I had never seen chickens or potatoes served like that before, but I liked them. For the first few days, lunch was not bad. We had French fries, chicken nuggets, burgers, pizzas, which I loved, and beef patties. However, on the 4th day, we were given something meaty and mushy that the ladies placed between 2 pieces of bread called a sloppy joe. I did not like that at all. I saw some kids eating peanut butter sandwiches, but I did not know how to ask for that. Therefore, I did not eat lunch that day. The lunch period was boring and lonely. It would have been so it would not have been so bad if I was sitting with a friend. However, I always sat alone at the corner of the table, watching the kids talk, laugh, and eat in groups. So that concludes chapter 2. So we see a little bit more of what's going on, and I would like for my students to be thinking about how we might have prevented some of Georgette's, uncomfortableness. What ways could we have eased the acclimation to the United States? And specific points, because I think that there's several really great opportunities for the educator, Georgette's teacher, to have pre-prepared Miss Levy, the teacher that takes him to the lunch, to sort of like let her know what's going to happen so that the kids don't feel so out of control still, and feel some semblance of security and safety, because we know that science says that students need that in order to grow cognitively, to make those neural pathways, and to get the confidence, the social emotional intelligence, the language skills that they need in order to advance. They have to feel safe. So giving them a sense of control in their environment is step 1, safety. Chapter 3. 2 weeks has passed and not much had changed in the cafeteria or classroom. I still sat in my class full of people, yet felt lonely and sad. I picked up a few words, but not enough to communicate. The teacher was teaching, the kids were working, talking, even having fun, but I felt like a square peg trying to fit into a round hole. Miss Levy tried helping me, but nothing she said made sense. Everything written on the chalkboard seemed foreign to me. I knew and understand most of the letters. However, there were some letters, like the letter Q, which did not exist in the Haitian Creole alphabet. That made it very challenging. The letter sounds very different in English. Therefore, I could not sound out the words like I would have in my native language. I felt like I didn't have a voice. While sitting in class, I overheard a couple of students and teachers use the word lazy while looking and pointing at me. I heard, "She's being lazy" a few times. I did not know what lazy meant, but from their facial expressions, it did not sound good. I asked my mom about it one day. "Mama, what does 'she is being lazy' mean?" I asked her while sitting at the kitchen table having a snack. "It means when someone doesn't want to work," my mom answered. I was shocked. How can they say that about me? I thought. They do not know me or what I'm capable of. Not only do I want to work, I want to participate and make friends. They have no idea how hard I tried to figure out what was happening in the classroom or other places in the school building. I was so upset that the students and teachers thought that I was being lazy. I could not even finish my snack, even though I love ice cream. The next day in class, I wanted to shout at everyone that I was not lazy. I just didn't understand the language. I wanted to show the kids that I was just as smart and capable as they were. Speaking a different language did not make me less intelligent or a lazy person. I just needed to understand what I was expected to do. If someone was able to translate for me and I were able to write in my native language, I would have shown them what I was capable of doing. One morning on my way to school, I decided that I would find a way to participate in class. All morning, I tried figuring out what exactly I was going to do or say. When I finally did, I was so excited and nervous. But I decided to ask one of the group of girls who were working together if I could join them. We were separated into small groups. I decided to make my move and ask if I could join their group. I leaned over to them and asked, "Mikawachita avec nous," which in English means, "May I sit with you?" Mwenka avec nous, may I sit with you. See, if someone who was speaking this Creole were listening to me, they might be able to make fun of me, but I tried really hard to say that appropriately. And that's the way that our students feel when they try to say things appropriately. We have to understand that not all of them have the same phoneme in their knowledge base. And so their tongues don't make those sounds as easily as our tongues make the sounds, the phonemes. So we need to make sure that we're articulating our sounds and that we're giving them ample and myriad opportunities to practice those new speech sounds that they're encountering in English. So, which means in English, "May I sit with you?" The girls looked at each other, then at me, and started giggling. Feeling silly, I straightened back up in my seat and looked forward while they continued to giggle. I felt embarrassed and wanted to cry, but I was determined and was not going to give up. On my way home that day, I realized that maybe they had laughed because they did not understand me. Therefore, I decided to learn the phrase in English. When I arrived home, I wrote down the question in my native language and used an English Haitian Creole dictionary to translate the sentence to English, word for word. Then I asked my family to help me pronounce the words to the best of their knowledge, since they were also learning English. Feeling confident, the next day I leaned over to the same group of girls and asked, "I sit to you?" I was very proud of my English. I had practiced pronouncing the words all morning. However, this time the group of girls laughed out loud, banging their hands on the table, holding their stomachs, and slapping their knees. Their teacher had to eventually quiet them down. What did I say wrong? I wondered, scratching my head. For the next couple of days, I tried hard to figure out what I had said wrong. I repeated the phrase in my head over and over again. "I sit to you? I sit to you." I had translated it just like it said in my own language, but something was not right. So this is Georgette with these horrible little girls. I'm sorry, I'm sure they're lovely, but they definitely need to have a discussion. The teacher should have had a discussion with people. And I'm giving away, possible discussion things, but there is something the teacher could have done to prevent this type of situation from occurring. And I feel so passionately about it because this is written by Gina Paul, who the story is actually about. This is her actual story, and she's an educator, and what an amazing educator. And I'm so glad that she wrote this because it's a great instructional tool for educators to sort of understand and see how silly it is not to prevent these things from happening with all of our ELL students. Chapter 4. On the third day, I waited until the class separated into small groups and approached Miss Levy in hopes that she would help me figure out the correct sentence. As I walked up to the desk, everyone stopped working and stared at me because I had never approached the teacher before. I was frightened, but determined. Miss Levy seemed surprised to see me, but had a small, inviting smile on her face, which made me feel a little more comfortable about approaching her. I sit to you, I said to her and pointed to the group of girls. At first, she seemed confused. She looked at the girls I was pointing to and then looked back at me with a frown on her face. Then she asked me, "You want to join them?" While pointing at the girls, I repeated the phrase, "You want to join them?" 3 times in a whisper. "You want to join them? You want to join them?" Just low enough for me to hear. I ran back to the girls and with a huge smile on my face, loudly asked them, "You want to join them?" The whole class started laughing. I looked around wondering why they were laughing. I said the phrase just like the teacher did. I knew that my pronunciation was not perfect, but I thought it was easily understood. Sighing with my shoulders sagging in defeat, I went back to my seat, embarrassed and upset. I folded my arms across my chest and hung down my head. My face felt hot with embarrassment. After the teacher had quieted the class down, she came and squatted down in front of me. She asked me, "You want to learn to say, 'Can I join you?' right?" I did not look at her or respond because I only understood some of her words. She stood up and motioned with her hand for me to follow her. I really did not want to go, but with a sigh, I stood up and followed her. She led me in front of the group of the same girls. I refused to look at any of them. I had my head down and my hands hanging loosely at my sides, staring at my shoes. Slowly, Miss Levy said, "Can I join you?" I did not know what she expected from me. Therefore, I ignored her. She repeated the phrase again and said, "Now you," pointing at me. I looked at her and shook my head. I knew she wanted me to do something based on her body language, but I was not sure what it was. She said the phrase again, pointed to me and said, "You repeat." Sorry, there was a fly. I realized that when teaching the class new words, the teacher would say a word, then say, "You repeat," and the whole class would first repeat, then spell the word. Although I did not want to be ridiculed again, I repeated the phrase anyway. In a whisper, "Can I sit with you?" Miss Levy said, "Bravo," and started clapping, and some of the kids clapped as well. I lifted my head and started smiling shyly. One of the girls pulled my chair closer to theirs and said, "Come join us," while motioning with her hand for me to come. I felt overjoyed as I walked to my chair and sat next to the girls. A few days later, I decided to make new friends. Feeling brave in the gym class one day, I decided to approach one of the girls while we were waiting for our group's turn at volleyball. She was sitting by herself, so it felt safer approaching her than approaching the girls who were sitting in groups. I thought that if she rejected me, at least it wouldn't be done in front of others. I was so nervous that my palms were beginning to sweat, and my breathing came a bit faster. I walked over and sat down next to her on a bench. I pointed to myself and said, "My name, Georgette." Then pointed to her and said one of the new phrases that I had learned. "What is your name?" The girl looked at me, smiled, and said, "My name is Tessa." Just then, the gym teacher blew his whistle for our group to start our game. I was very happy that I had been brave enough to make a connection. It was not a leap, but it was another small step to making friends. So that brings us to the end of chapter 4. Other stuff that I think maybe the educator could have worked on, Georgette's teacher may have prevented some of that, although she did rectify it in the end, was I'm sure, a learning situation for her as well, which is the case. Nobody goes into teaching knowing everything. And even now, we have just learned that there's a new and better way of teaching reading to students, the science of teaching reading, which goes based on what science has told us, what the advances in neurology and neurological science have told us about the ways in which humans, little humans, and even older humans, the way in which we learn, and specifically the way that we learn to read. So teachers are always learning, and we can always make ourselves better. But in order to make ourselves better, we have to reflect on what we're doing right now, and then think about how we can do things better. And so this is one of those books that I encourage you again to read with your campuses, to encourage them to reflect. Are you doing enough for your ELL students to bridge the gap to make it successful for them? Are you engaging them daily in authentic, oral language opportunities, just speaking opportunities with you? How are you doing, Georgette? How was your day? How did you sleep? How did you sleep? I slept so well. Thank you. So just making opportunities, enlisting people in along the campus to engage. Maybe if you have people that speak the same language, if it's Spanish or Mandarin, you have an employee on the campus that speaks that language to be sort of a bolstering support system for that language learner. Okay, so here we are with chapter 5, and let me see how many chapters we have. I said it wasn't very long. Chapter 7, and then some discussion questions. So we're on chapter 5, boys and girls. And here, I don't know, but a good strategy for reading, just because it's always on opportunities, just to think about what this picture means based on, like, prediction wise. I hope it means that she's made a friend in Tessa. We shall see. Chapter 5. Within the next few weeks, school got a little easier. I started to interact more with my classmates by pointing to an item in the classroom and saying the name in Haitian Creole. One of my classmates would then tell me the name in English. When I wanted to learn how to say chaise in English, I touched the shoulder of the girl who sat to my right, whose name was Leah. I pointed to the chair and said, chaise. She looked at me and said, chair. I repeated the word 3 times in a whisper in order to memorize it. Chair, chair, chair. I had realized early on that if I said words or phrases at least 3 times, I had a better chance at memorizing them. After a few days of pointing and learning, however, I could tell that my classmates and even teachers were getting annoyed with the constant interrupting and pointing. During math, I saw the boy to my left, whose name was Alex, with a calculatrice in his hand, and I wanted to know the name of this in English. I reached over and waved at him to get his attention. When he turned towards me, I smiled and asked, "This calculatrice?" While pointing at it, Alex rolled his eyes, sighed loudly, and said in a very annoyed voice, "Calculator," then turned away from me, shaking his head. That was not the first time that someone had gotten annoyed with me when I'd asked for the name of the object. Feeling discouraged, I decided to stop asking for help. So my prediction was incorrect, but she's pointing to this chair, and her friend is, with a smile, giving her that. So there's things we can do to help students, and we'll discuss that later. After 3 months in school, things were progressing, but not as fast as either the teachers or I would have liked. I was still not comfortable expressing myself in English. I was still upset using my not upset, I'm so sorry. I was still using my body language and hand signals combined with some new sentences that I'd been learning in order to communicate. Some of the students did not like working with me. I overheard them say that they did not believe that I would be able to contribute to the assigned projects due to my heavy accent and unfamiliarity with English language. During science, Miss Levy assigned us partners to work with on a project to construct a homemade lava lamp. My partner's name was Lizzie. The teacher gave us all what we needed, including written directions on how to make the lava lamps. I was excited to work on this project because I'd always loved science. Back in my native country, I always got high grades, the highest in my science classes. My partner, however, was not excited. She groaned when the teacher told us that we would be working together. But I can barely understand her, she complained in a whiny voice. That really frustrated me a lot because I had much to contribute. If I knew the language better, I would have been able to show her and the other students. What they did not realize was that I understood a lot more than I was able to express. Although we were able to complete the project with Miss Levy's help, I was not happy with the way Lizzie treated me. After the winter break, I did not want to go back to school. I was tired of people being frustrated with me and calling me lazy. Although some of the kids would say hello and even tried having conversations with me, they got frustrated easily when I had difficulties responding clearly enough in English. By February, it was I who was frustrated with them. No one at school seemed to realize how difficult it was for me. Hearing words and not understanding their meaning is scary and frustrating. For a 10-year-old, it was like I was on a bike going downhill with a brick wall coming fast at me, and I had no brakes. That is not a good situation. So here we have another picture, and we'll do just another. Remember, if you have pictures, just do little guesses. What do we think is going on there? I don't know. But that's Georgette, and she looks like maybe she's having a conversation with someone. So there are so many languages that are spoken in Texas. Predominantly, it's Mandarin and Spanish, but we do have an influx of Haitian, of refugees from Haiti, and we need to make sure that all of the students in Texas are supported and that they feel welcome, and that the students in our classroom are contributing to that support and welcoming sense, and that they are learning from this amazing experience of having someone that comes from a diverse culture, you know, and what an opportunity it is to teach, you know, native English speakers and, you know, a little bit of something different. Chapter 6. 2 weeks into February, a boy from my country was transferred from a different class into my classroom. He had come to the United States the previous year. Although he was not fluent in English, he spoke and understood enough to translate for me. What a relief. The first phrase that I asked him to teach me was, "Me buen paparse, me buen chispa comprend." It took a couple of minutes, but I got it. The next time a student called me lazy, I looked her in the eyes and said with my heavy accent, "I am not lazy. I just don't understand." This is a true story, guys. She rolled her eyes and walked away. Andale, which in Spanish means, there you go, or like, get going. It felt good that I was able to defend myself thanks to the new boy. His name was Arnold, and he was very helpful. It felt great to have someone I could relate to, someone who I knew wouldn't laugh at my pronunciation and jumbled up sentences. His English was not so great either, but it was much better than mine. He was lucky to have had a Haitian classroom aide in his class the previous year, who turned out to be a major help to him. During English language art, one day we were given 5 words and were asked to make 5 complete sentences using them. The words were expand, population, guardian, donate, and introduce. I knew what population meant, but the rest were new to me. I decided to start my first sentence with the word population. So I just want to, so Georgette standing up for herself. Good job. You know, this shows you she didn't even have the words with which to defend herself, to take agency. And so our beginner English language learners don't even have the language to ask for clarification, which is why it's so important that we are constantly doing needs assessments. And by needs assessments, not just on the content, but also on their second language acquisition, you know, if clarification is needed, and to be that support system for them. Alex had been moved from the desk to my left in order to make room for Arnold when he joined our class. Therefore, I was able to move closer to him to get help. I knew the sentence that I wanted to make with the word population in my head. I created the sentence in Haitian Creole, then translated into my broken English. I wrote down, United States is large population Haitian people. I showed it to Arnold, who helped me to correct it. You are missing a couple of words to make it a complete sentence, he said patiently. In the front of the United States, you need the word the, he corrected. Also, you might want to replace the word is with has, he suggested, and continued until we completed the sentence. With gratitude, I made the corrections. My new sentence read, the United States has a large population of Haitian people. We continued on like this, with Arnold explaining what words meant. Me writing the sentences the best I could, and then Arnold helping me to correct them. He was very patient. He was a very patient friend. With Arnold's help, I was able to engage in short conversations with other kids and the teacher. By April, I was able to use the sentences that I was learning to make new friends. So here is little Georgette and her partner in linguistic acquisition and language acquisition, you know, so it's really important to try to find someone, if you can, if it's possible, that does speak that native language and that has a pretty good hold on, you know, English, so that they can be another source of support, linguistic support. So there's only one more chapter left yet, but I'm going to just let my student in, and then I'll read the last chapter. So Ciencia Learning does sessions for educators that need help with their test preparation. If they're looking to attempt a different test, a lot of teachers have to attempt Science of Teaching Reading now, and so I do offer tutoring sessions for that. The PPR, special ed, and specifically English language learner help. And my biggest thing right now is brain-based learning for change, which includes socio-emotional learning curriculum, the Science of Teaching Reading, culturally responsive teaching, this is one of them. Jennifer, are you there with me? Not in yet. Culturally responsive teaching and the universal design for learning. What is wrong? Okay.
Hello?
Hi, Georgette. Georgette, sorry, I'm reading this book. Hi, Jennifer. I'm reading the book. I was doing my little,
Yes, you had mentioned that to me.
Yeah, so I started the recording and I just had the last chapter. So if you don't mind, I'm just going to read you the last chapter. And then when I send you the link, you could send the whole thing, because it's very good. And I feel very strongly that, especially now with the influx of refugees and not even just that, just the number of students that we have that are English language learners, that it's really important we consider their perspective and how sometimes our oversights create real sort of issues for them in their learning environment.
No, if
I'm going to continue with my recording of chapter 7. So just as one of our reading strategies, taking a look at the image before, and it looks, I hope that that is Georgette being successful in her life and graduating. So during springtime every year, the school put on a spring dance for the 4th and 5th graders. I heard several of my classmates talking about it, and Arnold told me that he had attended the previous year and that it was fun. I had never attended a school dance before, but it sounded like fun. 2 weeks before the dance, I asked my parents if I could go. Reluctantly, they agreed, but only because Arnold's mom was chaperoning. The next day, I was very excited to tell my friends in class that I was going to the dance. Tessa and I had gotten close in the past couple of months. When I saw her as I entered the school building, I excitedly told her my news. Tessa, I go to spring dance. Really? She exclaimed just as loudly with a huge smile on her face. Yes, I answered, smiling back. We linked arms in the hallway as we walked to her class, making plans about what we were going to wear. Even though I was more comfortable speaking English with Arnold, I was still able to communicate with others in and outside of the classroom. I did not allow my heavy accent or the fact that some of the kids still laughed at my pronounced or misused words to stop me from talking, participating, or making new friends. Making my own small group of new friends was a huge plus for me. At lunchtime, I now sat with Arnold, Tessa, and a boy named Sam. I felt like I was part of the laughing, loud, and part of the playful group of kids in the cafeteria. The feeling of belonging was in every smile and laugh. By the end of the school year, I felt like I had gone through a battle and won. I was not yet fluent in English, but I was able to do well enough in the class to graduate and to move to the 6th grade. On graduation day, I felt like I was riding a bike on leveled ground on a sunny day with a cool breeze blowing and my eyes closed, knowing that I had made it through my first year and it felt great. So at the end, I'm just going to tell you the discussion questions. What would you have done, or what could you have educator? And as we went through the video, I discussed all along the way, there are many things that the educator could have done throughout the year to have lessened the students ridiculing her, the situation where she was crying and didn't want to participate. Like all of that could have been avoided in some way. Have you ever felt left out? You might not be an ELL. English might not be a second language to you, but have you ever felt in a position where you didn't feel in your element, or you felt left out like the outsider? And was that a comfortable, good feeling for you? You know, and think about the students and how they're so little, they're barely developing, and how their emotions are still confusing for them. And so feeling left out and also confused and feeling like people are laughing at you just because you have an accent, like that must feel really terrible. Have you or any of your friends ever ignored another child on purpose? And so this is an important question for educators to continuously ask themselves. Not that if you and your friends make fun of people, I should hope not, if you're an educator, but just reflect on your pedagogy. Do you hold certain prejudices and sort of, you know, laugh at kids when they're being some type of way? There, I say this to every student, and I believe, Jennifer, I've said it to you, that I've never met a student that has wanted to disappoint me, that has wanted to appear lazy or stupid or inept, or anytime they are acting out behavior wise, or they're, you know, having struggling and shutting down, it is because they are not able to achieve a goal, and it is affecting them as a human being emotionally, because that doesn't feel good. I know for me, especially if I'm trying at something, to fail doesn't feel good. So to reflect on those things and to make sure that our prejudices in the classroom, whatever they may be, I'm not saying you even have them, but to look at them and really ask yourself, what are some of the prejudices do I have, and does that make me, you know, how does that affect instruction? How does that affect planning? And what are some changes I can do? And what are some ways that children can bully others? Like, and use examples from this text, examples that you kind of thought were bullying. in this story? Do you have children from other countries on your campuses? And if yes, these are more for, I guess, more for kids can read this story as well, but it's really good for educators. If you do you go the extra mile? Ask yourself, do you go the extra mile and talk to the cafeteria ladies so that your 7 ELL students, are being asked questions in their home language and also practice their English with someone who may have an accent, because the fear of having an accent is something that is so real. It is present in my adult interns who are trying to become teachers. And they'll say, I know my English is terrible. And I'm like, what are you even saying right now? Your English is beautiful. You have amazing English. And it breaks my heart that adults that are so wise and amazing educators will still have this own perception of themselves based on the way that they've been treated throughout their educational experiences. And all of it can be controlled. Children are awful people. They might laugh because they hear an accent that's different, but that's the job of the educator, to have a discussion about how we don't laugh at people with different accents. I mispronounce things all the time when I'm speaking English. And so especially when someone's learning English, you have to have a conversation with your students that it's an English learning environment as well. And we don't laugh or make fun of someone who is using more of their brain than all of us if we don't already speak another language. So let us not be the ones that are laughing. So that concludes my reading of I Am Not Being Lazy, I Just Don't Understand. And the girl learns to say this phrase after having heard teachers and students say this about her and not know how to speak and defend herself. She learns to say it and just really thrives and becomes a teacher. This is a true story. So excellent book. Please look up Gina Paul. I Am Not Being Lazy, I Just Don't Understand. So if you're a teacher, read it to your students. If you're a principal, read it to your campuses and have this conversation with them, because if you're a campus in the United States, you have ELL learners and you need to be doing more to make their academic experience comfortable and successful. So thank you, Ciencia Learning. And if you need anything, please email me at sauceda@ciencialearning.com.